excited about how welcomed I've been by the association.
Today is an example of a professional development day, an activity for me and for my colleagues. There's the fellowship and just being with people who have a shared body of knowledge and set of skills and feel passionate about the value of working with couples and families.
One of the things that I've been hoping for is a real attention to the development and care of our memberships, because I see our work as being a work of radical hospitality.
I'm finding an incredibly helpful organization just in terms of resources. I'm finding the workshops and the training to be really practical and helpful and hands-on in terms of my own practice. I find the organization to provide a great support network, peer support as well as supervising. It makes you feel like you're not alone, that there are people out there that do what you do and get what you're going through and are there to give you tools and skills and support when you need it.
So I would like, under my leadership, such as it is, that we would be known as a really welcoming and hospitable organization, that people would be able to find their professional home, be able to problem solve and find solutions for the challenges of doing this work. And we would be inviting people to consider how relationship therapy, paying attention to couples and families, actually improves and enhances the life of being in Ontario over the next couple of years. So I get that big ambitions, but they're really grounded in relationship and the idea that we can do better together than we can do apart.
First of all, I want to point out that reconciliation is an interpersonal achievement. Reconciliation cannot be achieved by one person. Forgiveness is possible to do individually. You can forgive another person without them even knowing that you've forgiven them, but reconciliation is impossible unilaterally. It has to entail both parties have to be involved, so it's a mutual achievement, right?
I've heard Dr. Tom speak before, and as I think about it, I have been interacting with his work for about 12 years.
I also want to point out how reconciliation itself presupposes that there was previously a trusting relationship and that trust has been broken in some way. And I found that this definition of reconciliation as the restoration of trust very useful because of the focus on trust and looking at trust as a core issue to try to bring forth in the process of reconciling. When we look at trust, I think it's useful to look at the various components of trust, and there's three components that arise for me that are important. In order to trust somebody else, first of all, you need to believe that the other person shares some core values with you. You know, that they believe in, say, mutual respect, they believe in fairness, they believe in honesty, or whatever it might be, that you have to believe that they have the same values basically that you have. Okay? Secondly, in order to trust another person, you have to believe that the other person has good intentions towards you. They may have the same values, but if they don't intend to be kind or supportive of you, then you find it hard to trust them. Right? Thirdly, and this I think is even more important for us as therapists, is that in order to believe or to trust another person, you need to believe that not only do they share the same values, they have good intentions towards you, but they have the competence to make good on those good intentions. So in other words, say if we wanted to hire a babysitter and there's a neighbor adolescent who we came from a good family, we knew that they had the same values as our family basically, and that they liked our kids, they meant well for our kids. But if we didn't believe that that adolescent had enough knowledge or competence about what to do if certain problems arise, we still couldn't trust them. Right? So this third component I think is really important, because when we're working on trying to restore some relationship where there's been a betrayal or something, we need to bring forth some competencies that were not present before the rupture or damage occurred in the relationship. Often in situations of unresolved conflict, there's a lot of attention paid to the mistrust, that people can't trust, and so forth. I don't find the focus on mistrust that useful. I find it far more useful to focus on trustworthiness. Like, what can be done to make it possible for the other person to trust, rather than to as it were, blame a person who can't yet trust, which is often the case. And so I think that's useful to shift onto trustworthiness rather than the mistrust. The other issue that I found useful to consider with regard to the notion of trust is to help people to learn above suspicion when the issue has to do with not doing something that was done before that was so hurtful. Like if there's some kind of abuse that occurred, and it's hard to prove that you're not going to do something, right? And so one needs to sort of organize oneself to live in such a way that people don't even get suspicious of you. And learning to live above suspicion is a very valuable orientation to invite people to enter into.
My impressions were that he was very intentional, but also very specific about how cycles of shame and guilt, apology and forgiveness, victim and offender work together. So it's not just one linear, you should do this, but a more complex consideration of the issues.
And once conflict does emerge in a relationship, it tends to spread and deepen, through the relationship system, unless it's addressed in some way. Okay? Now, if people do have sufficient competence to stay in the relationship and contain the escalation, that's useful. And two basic strategies in terms of containing escalation. One is not very good, and that is to displace the conflict onto third parties, which is something that happens a lot. Parents often displace their conflict onto the children. You and I could displace our conflict onto the organization. It's a way that we can continue in the conversation without allowing the escalation to cause more damage. But the second strategy is far more useful, and that is to agree to disagree. And for this to work, one needs to try to adopt a stance of seeing the other person's view legitimate for them. That even though you don't agree with that view, you can see that it's legitimate for them. And the more that they get the sense that you're accepting that, the greater the chances are the escalation will be contained.
I think it parallels the work of marriage and family therapists, that we work with complexity and with relationship.
And you as a therapist, by acknowledging some of the trauma and hurt, can already initiate a healing process. And sometimes I find that it's almost like it's an apologetic process by proxy. Like I can say, I'm really sorry that you were hurt in this way. I mean, this must have been a very painful experience for you. And for a therapist to convey that is already beginning to enter into the dynamic of apologizing and forgiving.
It was wonderful to have Carl Tom here today. He is one of my very favorite and most influential foundational resources for my work as a therapist and as a supervisor.